Atheism is one of those topics that sparks strong opinions, curiosity, and sometimes even discomfort. But today, I want to invite you to look at this subject not as a debate to determine who's right or wrong, but as a path of reflection. What does it mean not to believe in God? Why would someone choose this path? And more importantly, is it worth it? In a world where belief in a higher power is so deeply rooted in many cultures, deciding to reject the existence of God can feel like swimming against the current. But it is precisely this countercurrent that invites us to ask deeper questions about ourselves, our purpose, and what ultimately matters. So stay with me until the end of this video, because we'll be diving into a profound discussion that might just change the way you see the world and your own existence. Throughout history, many thinkers have questioned the existence of God. Some have even considered belief in a divine entity as an obstacle to the progress of humanity. One of the most famous critics of religion, Friedrich Nietzsche, declared that God is dead, referring to the decline of traditional Christian values in Western culture. For Nietzsche, the absence of God was an opportunity for humanity to create its own values, to define its own meaning. But is it really possible to find meaning in life without appealing to something greater than ourselves? This is where one of the main arguments of atheism comes into play: the search for truth. Many atheists do not reject the idea of God out of rebellion or arrogance, but out of a desire to understand the world as it truly is, without resorting to supernatural explanations. From this perspective, science becomes the greatest tool in the search for answers, offering explanations based on evidence rather than faith. Take Richard Dawkins, for example, a biologist who has spent much of his career criticizing religion and defending a worldview based on evolution and scientific rationality. For him, nature itself is full of wonder, and it doesn't need myths to be appreciated. But this rejection of belief does not come without its own dilemmas. If we are the result of random events in an indifferent universe, then where does our purpose come from? Why should we do good if there is no divine punishment or reward? For some, this perspective leads to existential despair, a feeling that life is devoid of meaning. Others see it as an invitation to create their own meaning, to define their own purpose in an autonomous and authentic way. Existentialist philosophers, such as Jean-Paul Sartre, argue that it is precisely the absence of a predetermined purpose that gives us the freedom to define our existence. Sartre said that existence precedes essence, meaning that we are born without a predefined purpose, and it is up to us to give meaning to our own lives through our choices. In this sense, atheism can be seen as a kind of liberation from dogmas and preconceptions that often come with religion. Without the belief in a supreme being who dictates the rules of life, one is free to question, explore, and seek answers without fear of divine punishment. This freedom, however, also comes with a burden: the responsibility for one's own life. Without God to lean on, it is up to each person to find the strength to face their problems, their fears, and their doubts. And while some argue that the absence of faith makes life darker, others say that it is precisely in accepting the uncertainty of existence that we find our true strength. It is in embracing the unknown that we learn to appreciate the here and now. Life becomes an adventure in which we create our own story rather than following a script already written. The psychologist Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, said that even in the face of the greatest suffering, it is possible to find meaning, and that this meaning is often found within us, rather than in a divine being. Now, it's time to hear from you. What do you think about atheism? Do you believe that life can be truly meaningful without a belief in God? Leave a comment below, share your perspective, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Let's continue this journey together. Returning to our discussion, it is important to consider the arguments of those who defend atheism. One of the most well-known is the problem of evil. If God exists and is all good, all-knowing, and all-powerful, why does evil exist in the world? This question has tormented theologians and philosophers for centuries. Some argue that suffering is necessary for spiritual growth or that it results from human free will. But for many atheists, these explanations are unsatisfactory. They see the existence of unnecessary suffering, such as natural disasters, diseases, and tragedies that befall innocent people, as evidence that a benevolent and omnipotent God cannot exist. Another aspect to consider is how the human mind tends to create explanations for things it does not understand. In ancient times, natural phenomena like thunderstorms and solar eclipses were seen as signs of divine wrath or favor. As science has advanced, many of these myths have been demystified, leading some to believe that religion itself is a relic of a time when humanity did not have the tools to understand the world scientifically. The famous physicist Stephen Hawking argued that we are gradually reaching a point where the idea of God is no longer necessary to explain the universe. But even if the arguments against the existence of God are strong, that does not mean that living without faith is an easy path. For many, religious beliefs are a source of comfort, providing answers to difficult questions and a sense of belonging. Rejecting these beliefs means facing the reality that we are alone in the universe, responsible for creating our own meaning. It is an act of courage, but it can also be an act of solitude. However, it is in this solitude that we may discover the strength we did not know we had. Living without God means accepting the possibility that life is, in fact, fragile, ephemeral, and finite. But it also means recognizing that every moment, every experience, and every person who crosses our path is unique and irreplaceable. It is understanding that the value of life lies in living it fully, with intensity and awareness. Stay with me until the end of this video because next, we'll discuss some practical implications of atheism and whether it is truly possible to live a meaningful life without believing in God. This reflection may change the way you see not only atheism, but also your own existence. Let's dive deeper into the implications of atheism and whether it truly provides a solid foundation for a meaningful life. One of the central questions that atheism raises is, where do we find the basis for morality if there is no divine law? Many religious people argue that moral values are rooted in God's commandments, and without this foundation, society would descend into chaos. But is this really true? Can we only be good because of fear of divine punishment or a desire for heavenly rewards? Philosopher Immanuel Kant believed that moral actions should be guided by a sense of duty, not by the pursuit of rewards or avoidance of punishment. For him, the foundation of morality lay in reason itself, in the ability to distinguish right from wrong through rational reflection. This idea opens the door to a secular ethics where human well-being becomes the focus. In this framework, we are motivated to act ethically not because a God commands it, but because we understand that our actions impact others and ourselves. An interesting example is the theory of utilitarianism, developed by philosophers such as Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, which proposes that moral actions are those that maximize happiness or minimize suffering. This approach doesn't require the existence of a God to make sense. Rather, it is based on the principle of promoting the greatest good for the greatest number. In this way, atheists argue that morality is not dependent on religion, but rather on empathy, compassion, and social well-being. Of course, this doesn't mean that life without God lacks challenges. In a godless universe, we may feel like small specks in an immense and indifferent cosmos, as physicist Carl Sagan pointed out. We may experience a sense of cosmic loneliness when we realize that the universe wasn't created for us and that our existence is the result of chance rather than a divine plan. But precisely because life is fragile and fleeting, it can become even more valuable. When we realize that every second is unique and will never repeat itself, we may find in this awareness a reason to live intensely and meaningfully. The feeling of existential emptiness is common for those who abandon religious beliefs. However, existentialist thinkers like Albert Camus propose that this absurdity of existence doesn't need to be a reason for despair. For Camus, the absurdity lies in the conflict between our need for meaning and the silence of the universe. The answer, then, is to embrace life despite its absurdity, to rebel against the lack of meaning by living with passion. In his famous work, The Myth of Sisyphus, Camus describes the Greek hero condemned to eternally roll a rock up a hill, only for it to roll back down. He concludes that we must imagine Sisyphus happy, finding meaning in the struggle itself. It's worth noting that while atheism rejects belief in gods, it doesn't necessarily imply the rejection of spirituality or transcendence. There are forms of spirituality that don't require belief in a supernatural being, such as meditation practices, the search for self-knowledge, and the appreciation of nature's beauty. For some, the idea of transcendence can be found in the experience of being part of something greater than ourselves, such as the human species, the ecosystem, or even the universe itself. In this sense, atheism doesn't necessarily lead to a purely materialistic worldview, but can open the door to other dimensions of existence. Now, returning to the topic of whether it's worth it to be an atheist, we must recognize the positive and negative sides. On the one hand, living without belief in God frees us from dogmatic rules and allows us to question everything with an open mind. It gives us the responsibility and freedom to create our own values, to find our own meaning, and to face life with authenticity. On the other hand, it requires us to accept the limits of our existence, to deal with the inevitability of death without the promise of eternal life, and to find strength in ourselves when facing suffering. The American writer and philosopher Sam Harris argues that it is possible to lead a deeply fulfilling and meaningful life without resorting to religious beliefs. He suggests that we can find profound meaning in human relationships, in art, in scientific exploration, and in the contemplation of the universe's mysteries. According to Harris, the search for truth, beauty, and kindness can be just as inspiring and meaningful as any religious experience. At the end of the day, whether or not atheism is worth it is a personal question that each individual must answer for themselves. What we can do is reflect deeply on these questions, examine our beliefs honestly, and seek to understand the perspectives of others. It's not about imposing one worldview on another, but about opening ourselves to the possibility of learning something valuable from every perspective. For some, atheism will be a path of liberation and empowerment, where the absence of divine belief leads to a deeper connection with life itself in its purest and most authentic form. For others, the loss of religious faith will be a source of uncertainty and existential angst. But it is precisely in this tension, in this dynamic between belief and disbelief, that we find the opportunity to expand our understanding of the world and of ourselves. If you have made it this far, thank you for staying with me throughout this discussion. I hope it has been enlightening and has given you new perspectives on atheism and the search for meaning. Remember that the journey of self-knowledge and understanding is a continuous process, and every question, every doubt, is an opportunity for growth. Let's finish with a quote from Viktor Frankl, who once said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." Whether you believe in God or not, the greatest journey will always be the one within. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like the video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Let's continue exploring these profound questions together.
See you next time.